Hi everyone, welcome back to a new episode of the Threat Researchers Live. I have Daniel with me, so my name is Pascal Henens. Hey Daniel, how are you doing?
Pretty good, Newman.
Good, holding up. Belgium is in bad position when it looks in the number of COVID infections. For once, we're the number one in Europe, but not from a positive point of view.
Yeah, we're having a spike over here in Denver as well. We're looking at possible second lockdown. So
Yeah, well, yeah,
mask on and stay safe.
we already have most of the stuff locked down right now, so. We can still leave the house, but uh, swimming pools are closed, restaurants are closed, so it's happening all over again. Been there, done that, I would say.
Yeah, I'm just really hoping they open the ski resorts up here. Likely possibility it's going to be closed all winter. So
Oh yeah,
more YouTube videos.
yeah. I was thinking exactly the same. Gives people more time to look at us, right? So we can
Yeah,
make more
exactly.
YouTube videos. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
We have a packed episode today, so there's a lot to talk about. I hope we get it in 1 hour. If not, yeah, we do it in 1 hour and a half. We all will be fine.
yeah.
Okay, so let's start. Oh yeah, for the people who are online, we are following the chat and I even made a special window for the chat. So you can see here that we can follow the chat. So if you have a question, don't hesitate, put it in the live chat and we will try to get back to you with an answer. I know that last time we had some questions in the chat and we ignored it because we were so busy doing other things. It's a lot to do. We are new at this YouTube stuff, so directing all the different screens and making sure that we are live and that the stream is going well. It's a little bit much, but we're getting there. Um,
Yeah, definitely getting there.
so don't hesitate to ask your questions. Okay, let's go. So first topic, Daniel. I think that this is a good one for you to start with, right? The
Yeah. Record DDoS attacks. We've heard quite a bit about them lately. Specifically in February of 2020, when Amazon came out and talked about their world record DDoS attack that had attacked their AWS infrastructure. At the time, it was a 2.3 terabit per second attack, mainly from a CLDAP vector. But Google had decided for a couple different reasons to disclose a unknown world record DDoS attack that had happened back in 2017. And the reason for disclosing this information was generally around the election and the threat of nation state attackers um, possibly trying to influence or disrupt the flow of information during the election processes. This attack was fairly interesting, though. When they got into the details about it, there's basically three different amplification attacks coming from it was like 180,000 servers. It was quite impressive. But it was a CLDAP, DNS, and SMTP servers that were used to launch this attack. And as I said, it was a 2.54 terabit attack. So it became the world's largest DDoS attack, but it was back in 2017. So we kind of have to retroactive go back and look at these attacks. But in general, when I look at these, they're all reflection vectors. Very rarely seen anything else outside that. When you look at the unidentified ISP that was attacked 1.7 terabits per second back in March 2018, that was Memcache, and that was following the GitHub attack that had also happened, I believe, in March. What was the Memcache? It was 1.35 terabits per second. Now, a lot of these other attacks don't have a lot of attribution to go with them, but this one from Google, they definitely doubled down on the attribution, saying it's China. They even listed the ASNs that was coming from. They say this was a 6-month campaign, which, Pascal, if you're familiar, the persistent campaigns that last this long are somewhat rare. I mean, we see them every now and then, but reality, we see a lot of attacks that are very small and don't last that long. They're very technical. They know where to punch you and they know where to hit you right, and they get out very quickly. Where these attacks are like someone running down the street with a very big stick.
Yeah, well,
And you can see,
sustaining an attack like that is pretty difficult. Yeah, you
yes,
need to
yeah.
constantly swap servers because yeah, it's once you know the source of the servers that are attacking you, especially in amplification, you make the ACLs and then you can block most of the attack. So they need to swap servers. Not say it can be automated
Well,
though.
right, right, and that's one interesting thing about the Google attack specifically is that They claimed it was nation state and claimed it came from China, but the attack campaign was 6 months long. I mean,
Yeah,
that's a
that's yeah.
pretty long campaign for a nation state attack there. They didn't specify what resource inside Google was being targeted, but a 6 month campaign for DDoS is quite resourceful, to say the least.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, well, and we know that nation states can be resourceful. They have the money to rent the servers and to have that kind of power. However, yeah, 6 months, but without specifying the target of the attack in Google, we have no clue of why or what is being attacked. It's good to talk about DDoS attack, but what went down? No, so they mitigated it. Okay, that's a good thing, but what was the motivation for China to do a 6 months long multi-terabit per second attack on this target? So
Yeah,
that's
and it kind of opens up other questions about attribution. I mean, I love attribution. I love it when people can come out and actually give out information, but there's a lot of holes that are left, right? So specifically, we know China is launching large-scale DDoS attacks, but at the same time, we have this RDoS group that's going around pretending to be Fancy Bear, Lazarus, Armada Collective, which gives them an opportunity. I'm not trying to get away from the subject, but I'm trying to say that with the attribution, these large-scale DDoS attacks, it is giving DDoSers an opportunity to run these extortion campaigns and to use fear to try and actually gain extortion from them. One of
yeah.
the things I found very interesting about the whole subject, though, is these RDoS groups that are launching large-scale DDoS attacks that use some of these reflective vectors. They also use other attack vectors. They're not really successful either, and that's an interesting thing there that normally ransom, just in general, ransomware and RDoS, ransomware does pretty well where RDoS doesn't, and I think there's something to be said about that. While DDoS is a little bit of a nuisance, it's also a serious problem when you start looking at some of these attacks that like Google had released, as far as a 1.54 terabit attack that was over a 6 month campaign. That's pretty serious. And so when you have these RDoS groups come around claiming that they're these APT groups, claiming that they have these sizes, it literally leaves the victims in a place to try and understand exactly who is attacking them and who isn't attacking them. And the tougher part is with misattribution, right? With the RDoS campaigns, there's a few people that actually came out and said that these were APT groups, and that's not the case. I mean, Fancy Bear is not in the business of actually extorting people via DDoS. It's just not their thing. When it gets down to Lazarus, yeah, a little bit confusing there because the group actually goes after um, money to fund their campaigns. But RDoS, I wouldn't actually say that it's Lazarus at all.
Yeah, well, I would add that even though that it didn't succeed in bringing down or disrupting any of the resources within Google, it must have an economic impact, no? If you have 6 months and you have to add to all your sizing, to all your networks, all your pipes are loaded with 2.5 terabit per second continuously for 6 months long, this must have an economic impact as well, no? Even though that
Oh,
from the outside you
huge.
cannot see it, but yeah, you have that cost that is out there that you have to pay to mitigate that attack. And mitigating means that yeah, the traffic is still there. Somebody need to ingest and digest that traffic. So somebody
One of
will
the
have to
interesting things,
pay for that 2.5 terabit per second, and yeah, that's a lot of
a lot of money. Yeah.
yeah.
One of the things I found very interesting about the Google attack is that these 180,000 servers were simultaneously targeting thousands of Google IPs. So they were doing a carpet bombing attack back in
Mhm.
2017. This was a tactic and technique that really wasn't publicized until about last year with the RDoS groups that were, I believe it was somewhere in Europe or Turkey that they were targeting
Yeah.
ISPs with the carpet bombing attack.
Or they had no clue what they were attacking either. That's maybe also
Yeah.
why Google cannot say what was being attacked, because the attackers maybe didn't have a clue either. They were just spraying traffic at them, which could be trying to impact them economically.
Yeah,
So
exactly. So we had a question that just came up in the chat about the new news that broke today about the FBI warning ransomware attacks known as Roku. These bad actors are targeting the healthcare sector. The question was, is this outside the RDoS campaign that we're seeing today? Yes, it is. Basically, RDoS and ransomware are two different factors. So ransomware is basically an encrypted payload that's delivered via email, encrypts all your data, and then the bad guys basically come in and ask you for money to decrypt files. Where an RDoS attack is someone that launches a sample attack against your network. They say they're going to take your network down if you don't pay. And if you don't pay, they usually launch maybe between a 20 gigabyte and 200 gigabit per second attack against your network. One of the interesting things about the difference of RDoS and ransomware is some researchers have started seeing ransomware groups who are unsuccessful in reaching a payment using DDoS to bring back their victims to the negotiation table. Now, while I haven't seen it directly, I find that a very interesting move to try and bring the victims back. But at the end of the day, it is a DDoS versus ransomware attack. And I think ransomware attack is, on a scale of 1 to 10, a very serious situation, up in 9s and 10s, where DDoS is, in the 6 or 7s, depending on how bad it comes in, right? So I think there's a sliding variable between the difference of ransomware and RDoS, but I think a lot of criminals out there might be using RDoS as a way to bring back victims to the ransomware table.
Yeah, well, yeah, we have
Right.
them seen go through different tactics, yeah. So first they just encrypted the data, and if you didn't pay for the key, well, then you that that was actually the ransom. But what people did is they started making backups and started making recovery procedures. So that wasn't
Yep.
effective anymore. So the next step was, okay, we're gonna steal some sensitive data. So now the whole thread is, okay, if you don't pay, yeah, that's fine. You don't need the decryption key, but maybe you care about your sensitive data that we will expose publicly. So maybe you care about a data breach. And if people, if they were not able to get access to sensitive data, now step three for ransomware is go to a DDoS campaign. So try ransom DDoS, which
It's,
yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say it's amazing just kind of watching the criminals learn and adapt
Hmm.
to the current environment. They talk a lot about researchers and security companies evolving through the threat landscape. So do attackers, and it's kind of an impressive year as far as disclosures of large attacks that have happened in the past, and new tactics, techniques, and procedures that both DDoS groups and ransomware authors are using. It's very impressive.
Yeah, that's to say the least. This year has been exceptional on all kinds of levels. Okay,
Yeah.
so ready to move on to the next topic?
Mozi, it's a fun one, isn't it? Blowing
Yeah.
up all the honeypots across the world.
Yeah, well, especially mine, and I should give you the context of the why we went be after Mozi and why we started looking in this was actually we both run some private honeypots, and at some point I saw that my internet use was going up to the point that at some point my internet provider, even though I have an unlimited access, but my internet provider caps it at 3 terabit or terabyte better. So that and in 1 week I consumed like 3 terabyte of data, which is not normal for me. Normally I get like 1.5 terabyte for a month, but now it was 3 terabyte in 1 week. So I went looking and everything came from my honeypots because what my honeypots do when they get infected, they take the URL, they send that URL to my home system. My home system then downloads the malware and then analyzes the malware, and we will see some screenshots and some graphs of the malware that I found. But by doing that, of course, I'm downloading information, so I'm consuming bandwidth. But up to the level of 2 to 3 terabytes per week, that's a lot. So when I went
Yeah.
looking in my honeypots, yeah, that's where I saw that there was a lot of activity, and we were not the only ones who were talking about that activity. So the origins of Mozi came from NetLab. So NetLab in September last year already discovered the first iteration of Mozi. We think it's the first, might have been a couple before that, but that was the first time that they actually detected the malware in their honeypots. So, and it's also one of those peer-to-peer botnets. So remember, you have the botnets that are using the general, which is the command and control server, where every bot is connecting into, which is particularly easy to bring down because if you bring down the generals, the bots, the soldiers are actually they're lost. They don't know where to run anymore. They cannot take or accept any commands anymore. So if you have a central infrastructure with a command and control server, all you have to do is take down the command and control server. However, if you build a botnet on a peer-to-peer design, which is like the same design as the DHT protocol, which is used by BitTorrent. So that means that there's no central point that you can take down. Everything is distributed in the network. Remember how
Now,
BitTorrent?
Pascal,
Yeah,
would you say that there's a growth in peer-to-peer botnets at the moment? I mean, we've seen Mozi, we've seen Ttint, and there's a few others.
yeah,
Is this becoming
VP.
a trend, do you think?
Yeah, well, I don't know if there's a growth, but certainly I hear more of it. So in the beginning, there was Hajime. Hajime was like the only one that we saw that
Yep.
was peer-to-peer, and this one came at the same time of Mirai. So it's not like it's a new thing. However, criminals start to see that it's something that is more interesting because it's harder to take down. Hajime had a life that it's still alive. I still get some files coming into my honeypots from Hajime still at this time, and that's like from at least October 2016. So the as long as there are two or three bots somewhere in the world that are up, this botnet is still active. So you
Which
cannot,
is crazy with the
yeah.
takedowns. Yeah.
Yeah, so if there's one that you forget, if there's one device that you forget, that device can again infect others and can start to spread. And the thing about those peer-to-peer botnets, so they use BitTorrent, that distributed network, to exchange information, and they put their commands in files and config files, but they also provide updates to the bots, so they can update themselves, they can add payloads. That was the case with Hajime. We never saw a malicious payload in Hajime, but here in Mozi, the researchers at NetLab, they found that it had DDoS attack payload. So all of the Mirai attack vectors were included in that bot. Now, the thing why it's not so popular yet, and still most of the botnets are using a central command and control server, is because it's easier to build. You have to build your own protocol, you have to build the algorithms for the distributed hash table, you also need to keep a bot somewhere that connects into that network. You need to make sure that there's encryption because anyone who has access to a bot would be able to send commands. So you need to encrypt more heavily. You're actually more open. The other case, if you have command and control, you need to hack the command and control server, which typically is pretty easy. But anyway,
Yeah.
if you hack the command and control server, then you get access to all the bots, but you need to get access to that command and control server. So they only have to secure that command and control server. In a distributed environment, if I can take one bot and I dissect that bot and I can virtually patch that bot to get access to their network, I can inject new commands in the network and I can actually destroy the botnet from within. And you can do that just by binary patching. That's why their encryption is so important, and that nobody can get access to the keys, or the keys are not distributed in the bots. So it's a little bit more difficult, it's more work, but I would say that for the attackers, if you look at the lifetimes that we solve those botnets, it's much more rewarding. And also the sizes. Hajime at some point was how much? Close to 500,000 bots?
Yeah, it was up there. It was quite up there. Yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, so and as long as you have two bots, yeah, you can restart a new campaign because if the attacker has, so if he built like a big botnet and then somebody took down most of the bots because they find out that what kind of attack he was using or infection vector he was using, most of the devices were rebooted because the FBI asked the people to reboot their modems, for example. Um, well, even in that case, if there's only one or two left, he can still update the code. He can add new vulnerabilities to exploit, and then he can use that to rebuild his whole botnet. He doesn't need to start from scratch like with other infrastructures.
And it's kind of tough, like you said, with the takedowns. As long as there's two that are up, it becomes very difficult to take down these peer-to-peer botnets. And one of the problems that we're seeing with Mozi is the heavy activity of it coming out of China. And I know we'll
Yeah,
get to that a little bit, but that's a little bit of an issue. There's we need kind of a global effort to take out these botnets, right? And so
yeah,
when you have remaining servers left in mainland China, you kind of have to look at CERT-CN and ask him,
mm,
um, can you help, or what can we do to help you?
yeah.
This is a serious problem that it's going to have to require a lot of work between ISPs, CN CERT, and as you said, basically resetting a bunch of routers.
Yeah, exactly. So, and yeah, to your point of activity, and also what we said about peer-to-peer botnets, IBM X-Force claimed that over 90% of the observed IoT botnet was from Mozi between October 2019 and June 2020. So that's a big portion, you know.
A lot of people have contested these statistics, and I have to
Yeah.
say I would agree with the 90%. A lot of people also have gone out and clarified. It really depends on your perspective and your view of the threat landscape.
Mhm.
Depends on where your honeypots are, how many you have.
Exactly. Yeah.
Really will determine how much percentage of network traffic you're seeing. While 90% is a big number to put on it, I will stand by the 90% and say, yeah, my honeypots were absolutely slammed. I mean,
Yeah.
basically
Well,
all the binaries I was capturing during this time period were Mozi. I wasn't seeing much of anything else. And that's very interesting when you're monitoring networks and you're looking for malicious traffic and you see a giant peak. To me, my concern is what's happening underneath that peak. Like Mozi, great, we can look at it all day long. We have the samples, very obvious. But what's the little ones that are sneaking past at this moment? That's kind
yeah.
of what concerns me as a researcher is when you see massive spikes. What's going underneath the radar? It's a tough one, right?
Yeah. Exactly. Um. So yeah, to the point of IBM, I didn't see the 90%, but wait, I'm gonna verify something because okay, our watches are back. I saw our watches drop to zero suddenly, so I thought we were under attack.
Oh.
Now, to the point of IBM, I wouldn't say that 90% of my honeypots were seeing Mozi from October last year until September of this year, but something really strange to me is that as IBM was writing the article, and the article came out when exactly? It was on the slide, September 17. But look at 9/11 for my honeypots. 11 September, my honeypot suddenly saw a big spike in attacks. So this is like the honeypots that I have at home, and typically they run at about 50K events per day. So that means 50,000 infections per day. And suddenly, from one day to the next, they jumped to close to 1 million events. And it has been like that. Well, yeah, there's a small gap here, but the reason is, yeah, as you know, I got in trouble with my internet. My uplink could not take
Yeah, yeah.
all that bandwidth. I even closed some of my external honeypots because I have honeypots in the clouds and different clouds that connect to a central point in my home where the other honeypots are. Well, I had to close them off because it was just too much. So if you see gaps here or lower numbers, this gap for sure is mistakes that were made across, or me better closing down the whole thing just to recover from what was happening. But you see in green here, it's Mozi. So whatever is in green here, it's all Mozi. So you see that Mozi was taking up a big portion of all the attacks. So like 500,000 was Mozi. The other were Telnet probes. And of the Mozi here, all the attacks were done in Telnet. And that brings me to the infection vector. So most of the infection vectors that I saw or that I still see are Telnet. And Telnet is just using a default username password to get access to a device. And unfortunately, there's still a lot of devices that have Telnet enabled by default and that have very easy to guess default passwords. You know, it all started in 2016, but we're still not there. And the last that I heard, Brian Krebs had it on Twitter. Somebody, one of the security providers, who used a password for an RDP server, which was password 01. It shows, right? And the president of the U.S. that uses a password like "Make America Great Again 2020," MAGA 2020. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
also
maggots. 2020.
so those passwords are still at risk, and I think that still a lot of the infections come through that. I see a lot of activity on the telnet. So this is the sequence that he does. So they do a couple of standard Linux commands like start, enable, config terminal. That's just if depending on which device they're on, they get a banner from the honeypot or from the device that they connect to, and typically they can identify what kind of platform it is. But some platform needs extra commands to enable admin mode or to get into the configuration terminal. So, and then they do some testing command, and typically that is to make sure that they're not in a honeypot. So the first line, it's like, okay, they send some commands, they do some tests, especially the echoes with the escape characters is something that we saw back in the days in end of 2016 when they started playing with different variations of Mirai, trying to get away from honeypots because honeypots that interpret that string did not answer correctly because the echo command inside BusyBox is written differently than the real echo command on a Linux system. So if you would run echo -e on a Linux system or you run it with BusyBox, you get a different reply back. So so they do that just to test if they're in honeypot or not. But in my case, yeah, we know those tactics, so we take them up as a use case and we make sure that we reply the right thing when they send that command to us. So and then the next line is the actually where it gets downloaded. So you see the wget where you have the port is also random, so it's changing, but this is the IP address of another device because the devices themselves serve as download servers, which is also again a difference between the peer-to-peer that we have been seeing in the botnets and the command and control ones, the ones that have a central command and control. The ones that have a central command and control typically have a central download server, or they can have a couple of download servers, but they all download from that one central point. Um, Hajime, for example, did it differently. Every infected bot is in itself a download server. So that means that the number of download servers, it runs in the hundreds of thousands. So taking down the download server or just blacklisting the download server through abuse, that's not enough. So
Right.
because yeah, it's pretty much everywhere. So that adds again to the difficulty to take down those botnets, and it's the same here. So Mozi is also using that same pattern. Now in my case, it was using the name I. I'm not sure why in my case I always see the I coming back, and why many others see Mozi.m and Mozi.a in their honeypots. But if you see an I, pretty much sure it's gonna be a Mozi. If you see a .i, that's Hajime. The .i, which is kind of funny actually that Mozi is using I and Hajime was using .i. And you know the dot is just hiding the file on Unix. So, but there's other ways of infecting, and yeah, on the previous slide we saw the 11 different infection vector that the first Mozis were using that were identified by NetLab 360. But yeah, I also see, and Daniel also had it in his honeypots, and our corporate honeypots are full of it, is the Netgear DGN remote code
Yes.
execution. It's a vulnerability that was discovered back in October 2017, but is still very much effective. And what you do is just an HTTP command to the IP address, and you give in a fixed URL, and then you put in your command, and what happens is, yeah, okay, when that command gets executed, well, your shell code that you put here, rm minus rf wget and download mozi.m to tmp netgear and then start netgear with shell netgear, that's going to be executed as you run that command to that device. So what they typically do, they spray and pray. So they will run that command to every IP address that they can find in the IPv4 range to setup.cgi with a certain other IP. And they will just try to execute it. Whether it's a Netgear or not, they don't care. If it's not a Netgear, it will not work. If it's a Netgear, it will be infected. And the same with this one, language Swedish. That was actually one that that's an RCE from CCTV and DVR devices that was detected back in March of 2016. So that's even predating the whole Mirai thing. So that's one of the infection vector that's still actively being used by Mozi, one of the top vectors that he's trying to use to infect devices. Now, if I'm not mistaken, that those were of 70 different vendors, mostly from Chinese making. But the thing was with those vendors, if I'm not mistaken, is that they were not fixable. Means that there was no way to update them to get firmware updates. So that means that the RC is in there. It stays in there forever until the people take the device offline and throw it away. So the only way to fix
Which is
it is take it offline and put a new one in. So yeah, that's a hard thing to ask for people at home. Take out your camera and replace it with a new one.
ultimately why we battle and fight an uphill battle here. A lot of these IoT devices are just being shipped out vulnerable with no hopes or prayers of them ever being patched or fixed at all.
Yeah, that's what brought us here. I think that everybody agrees on that, and there has been many discussions on that topic and who's responsible, who can fix it. How, yeah, it's everybody's responsibility, I would say. We are as responsible for putting our firewalls out there and leaving them open as the one who makes it, who puts in the default passwords. There are some regulations, yeah, but there's so many devices still out there. It's amazing, and you will see. Coming back to Daniel's comment about China, you will see what happened in September, and that it still can happen even though with modern devices and in this day and age. So here you see
Yeah.
what I'm doing in my honeypots. I download, so I find the URL and the infection vector. So you see it come in with the infection vector that you see here. So this telnet, for example, I take that wget, so I take the HTTP, so the location of the malware. I download the malware. I run an MD5 sum on it to have a fingerprint. And then that fingerprint I store in my database. And that's why I have so many downloads on my internet line when I was being attacked by millions of those Mozis. I was just downloading millions of binary files. And although they're not that big, we're talking like 60K, 100K for a malware binary typically. But still, yeah, if you're talking the millions, that's a lot of data that you're taking down from the internet. So looking at the different binaries, I saw a difference between the binaries that were used in the first couple of days and the ones that are coming in now in October. So they shifted to another binary, to a newer binary, but there's still the older binaries out there. Now the interesting point is, so this is overlaid with what is Mozi. So this is, I took the top 5 file fingerprints across all my honeypots, so across all my data that comes into my honeypot, and the top 5 correspond actually all to Mozi bots. So how do I know that it's Mozi? Well, I have a list like about 80 file fingerprints. We call them IOCs, or indicators of compromise. They are published. You can find them on VirusTotal. You can find them on URL House. You can find it also in most of the articles. People put in an IOC and they put the uh, MD5 sum or the SHA-265. I use the MD5 because it takes less place in my database. It's just an optimization. There's a more chance of collision, but hey, I'm not working with billions of data records, so I think my collisions will be okay here. So for me, it's quite enough. But yeah, so that's how you can recognize that it's Mozi. And I have a list like about 80 of those fingerprints that are all pointing back to Mozi. So that means that Mozi has 80 different binaries. Now you have to know each version of Mozi also have different binaries for different platform. So if they are trying to infect a certain modem, that can be a MIPS platform, can be an ARM platform like the Raspberry Pi. They can just build an X32-bit or X64 if they're targeting also Linux or newer processor architectures. So for each architecture, there's like 5 or 6 different binaries for each new version of the malware typically. And when they rebuild it with a new feature, they will build 5 new binaries, and you will catch some of them. So if I say about 80 of them, that doesn't mean 80 different versions, but you also have different binaries for different platforms. Now, when I look at the unique IPs per day, so this is the total number of binaries that I'm counting here. So that means the number of infections. Now, as one device can do multiple infections to the same I target or victim in the same day. They just retry. They just try like 10, 15 times. Once they find a victim, they will for sure retry a couple of times. So here's the unique IP. So that was about 4,000 back in the beginning of the campaign, and now went back to about 1,000 IPs per day that are trying to infect me. And you see with the same binary. So the binaries correspond, but that's the number of IPs per binary, and duration is pretty much the same. So I would think that he retries like 10 times for each of them. Um, Maybe 100 going from 400 to 4K. So 100 times retry per day per IP address. Now, the interesting part comes when you start to overlay the origin. And that's where I found that when I was getting attacked, everything came from India. So in my honeypots, I had millions of requests coming in from India. Now, after a while, that shifted to China. And this is like a heat map of where you can find Mozi. That's over the whole year. So I compiled the whole year of data, make a heat map where is Mozi. There are a couple of exceptions outside of India and China, but you see that the epicenter is still very much China, and then India have some weaker spots. Now the weaker spots can be explained in September. So what happened in September? And here is like a mo week by week view of where the most of the Mozis were located. I mean, the source of the infection, the ones who were attacking the rest of the world. So between August 31 and September 6, so the first week of September, almost all attacks to our honeypots, even in Deception Network and also in my honeypots and Daniel's honeypots, they all came from China. Now, going into the second week of September, you see that the epicenter shift completely to India. So it moved away from China. There's still activity in China, but there's far more activity. And yeah, it looks like it's less activity, but actually I have to say it's the same activity. It's just less because this activity is much higher now. So much more activity from India. And it stayed in India for the third week in September. And then in the fourth week of September, Mozi left India and went back to his roots to China. It's like a
Yeah.
migration of Mozi. So you see it going from China to India. It sits in India. It has fun in India. Good vacation. Now going back home to China, right? It's like we all are. It's a summer vacation. Only it happened in 2 weeks in September.
They got together and they turned it off and turned it back on.
Yeah. So here we have pretty much the same image, but that's from my honeypot taken day by day. So over the different periods from September and October. And here you see the red one is India, and here are the AS orgs. I yeah, I didn't want to put them out there and say who was infected, so I just put in black bars and I put in which AS org was from India, which one was from China. But the two important ones is the green one, which is this one here, and then the red one, which is this one here. So those were the two major ones that you see coming back. The others are also having infections, but it's like, yeah, that's less statistically important. The big red one was a service provider in India, and you see that he was infected pretty hard, and almost nothing from China, so very small amounts from China, and then it went back to China. And trying to find out what happened is I took some IPs, like, yeah, I don't remember how many exactly, but I did it manually. I just took some random IPs from that AS range for this provider in India, and I run it to Showdown just to find out what are the open ports. Maybe those are devices with many open ports, and actually those devices had nearly no ports open, except for I found that all of them had port 7547 recently closed. Means that I was watching somewhere here in this period. So the whole wave of infection in India was already over by the time that I was looking in Showdown. So that port was recently closed, and that port corresponds to the TR069 port. And TR069 is a management protocol that service providers use to remotely manage their devices. TR069 is also the protocol that the attacker Best Buy, or Daniel K, we already talked about Daniel K on this show already a couple of times. So this guy did the attack on Deutsche Telekom. I don't know if you remember, somewhere in November in 2016, he had a Mirai and he customized that Mirai, and he was one of the first to put in a new attack vector in Mirai besides the standard Telnet ports. So he put in a vulnerability in TR069 where he where he replaced NTP server 1. And he sent that out to Deutsche Telekom, and Deutsche Telekom had like 900,000 of their modems that were rebooted on the same day and had many people disconnected. And afterward, they came back, yeah, it was a failed attack attempt. That was TR069. And it's not
That's a pretty
failing.
impressive one too.
Yeah, it was an impressive. Yeah, this guy already had 400,000 bots. He did the attack on not on Cellcom, on MTS for Cellcom, and he actually, by
Yep.
accident, he took down Liberia. He just took a whole country offline from the internet by accident with his 400,000 botnet. Now, this was 900,000 and this failed. So imagine that this would have worked. This guy would have had a 1.3 million Mirai botnet to perform attacks back in end of 2016. So it was pretty amazing.
Which is interesting to kind of double back to where we began. September 2017 was officially the world's largest DDoS attack, which was kind of interesting. We saw a little bit of a lull
Yeah,
in
actually,
activity
yeah.
coming out of Daniel K, but in reality, there was no lull. There was just people being quiet about large scale attacks that were continuing to persist on.
With people you
Sorry, I
meant
didn't mean to distract you. I just wanted to throw that out there.
with with people you meant Google, right?
Yeah.
Now, one of the things that I found in Mozi and that nobody ever talked about before, so I don't know if it's new because I did not. Typically, we don't take a lot of time to reverse those binaries because they all get classified as that. They're all clones of Mirai. So if we have to analyze every new Mirai clone that we get in our honeypots, we would be analyzing botnets day and night for the last 4 years. So we don't go in and analyze all of them. But this one,
Yeah.
I had a particular interest because why is it coming at me at 1 million infections per day? So it must have something special, no? So yeah, it was Mozi. We knew Mozi already, but when I went to look into Mozi itself and I ran it in a sandbox, I found out that Mozi actually has persistence on board. So you know that most of the Mirai clones, they are not persistent, means that they infect the device, they execute themselves, they kick out all competing bots, they close ports so nobody else can get in and kick them out, and then they run in memory. They even delete their own code so that you would not see that their code is there and that competing ones cannot see that that the device is already infected, or not in an easy way at least. But when you reboot the
Mhm.
device, it's gone until the next infection, of course. So yeah, if you have a vulnerable device, it only takes a couple of seconds before you get reinfected. I remember talking in 2017 about my honeypots at my home network, so on a home line, where I saw every 2 minutes there was at least one infection coming in. So when you reboot a device, it
Yeah.
takes maximum couple of minutes and you're reinfected by another one. And there's lots of competition out there. You have already heard us talk about botnets like a couple of times on this series. And yeah, there's so many out there. Luckily, because that means that they're also fragmented. They're all fighting the same war. So there's nobody who can build that super botnet like in the time with Daniel K, who was sitting on 400,000 and who was almost getting over 1 million bots in a single botnet. That's not happening anymore. It's too much competition. It's too much fragmentation.
Yeah. And one of the nicer things too is, I guess, a nicer things at the moment. Most of the criminal actors aren't using peer-to-peer botnets; they're using centralized
Yep.
server C2 servers. So, when new variants of Mirai like Catan and all these other ones come out, they're fairly easy to take down.
Yep.
It's ones like Ttint and Mozi that consume a lot of time, which is almost like a DOS on researchers if you think about it.
Yeah, well, actually, you saw it in URL house because my honeypot, what it does, it analyzes the file and then it takes the URL and sends it automatically to URL house to register it as a malicious URL. And then what URL house does is send an email to the owner of that AS where that IP is sitting and sends an
Mhm.
abuse email to tell him, hey, that server is used as a malicious download server. And then they take it down, and URL House keeps statistics. Now, if you look at the statistics back in September, it was really out there. It was very high. So I'm sure that URL House also felt the load. I also saw it. So I was at like almost 40,000 URLs that I reported every, also in the last week, I think. It's like a sliding window that they have with the competition of the top 10 most active submitters. And I was number three with like 50,000 of them, which is a lot. And normally, the number
Yeah.
of unique, because every URL needs to be unique. So when you send it to URL house, first they do a check if it already exists or not. If it does not exist, they register it and they attribute it to you. So it's like 50,000 unique ones in 1 week. And that's a lot of abuse emails. So can you imagine that service provider in India probably got a lot of email at that moment when that automatic system starts to kick in, they start to sending us. So it's almost like a DDoS. I was DDoS because my internet line was completely filled up. So I had to actually put free packs on it to go back from modem speeds to normal speed. URL house is getting hammered by this. URL house sending email to the ISP who also gets hammered by this. So yeah, it's also
Yeah.
almost start to get proportions of DDoS. You're right about that. It's like an alternative way of DDoS.
Oh yeah, I mean, he uses URL host. You just go on there and you look up all the ELF binaries being submitted. And it's almost a challenge to find a non-Mozi binary that's been
Yeah,
submitted.
yeah,
It's kind of crazy how much activity it's taking up at the moment. And I'd say it's because we can't take it down. It's a very difficult subject right now to take down peer-to-peer botnets. And if it's so simple as just taking down a centralized command and control center
yep,
server, this problem will be done with. But this looks like it's going to be a campaign that will run for quite a while until we figure out how to deal with it.
yeah. So in terms of persistence, so Mozi is one of those when you reboot it tries to come back. That does not, I have to note this does not work in all devices. So many of the modems are on read-only flash, which means that things like changing etc rcs.d will not work. Some other modems have them protected and you can only use their own configuration commands to change the configuration. So that will also not work. However, some of them are using the standard Linux commands, and sometimes Mozis also get into Linux servers because Linux servers also sometimes use default passwords. If they are deployed as a container from a standard image, for example, forget to change the default password on there, or they take a VM image, they copy it, they forget to change the default password. There's many ways that a Linux can have a default password. So
Yeah.
at crcs.d, well, that makes sense. That's where all the boot up scripts are. So he makes his own S95 baby. So, and he calls user networks, and user network actually is the copy of itself. So that's where he copies himself and where he executes himself. And it's networks and not network. So also in initd, different files in initd that already exist. So this one is a newly created file. These are existing files, so like the keyboard setup, hardware clock, that's already all in there. He just injects himself. And he doesn't do it in a clean way because you see that there's indentation here for the different cases in the shell or in the bash script. But he just puts himself, however, just appends a line in the middle. Boom. So user network, so tries to execute it in the background. And then the more interesting one is actually when Python is installed, you have the standard library to talk to the serial port. And to talk to the serial port in Python, they have a special daemon which is called port publisher that can run and that allows your script to talk to that daemon to go get access to the physical serial port. So, and he also inserts himself there in there. So if there's any Python code that uses the serial port on the device, it will also be executed automatically. So that's how it gains persistent. And another interesting part is when you just dump the strings inside the program, you can see that he has all, or that Mozi has all the provisions to build or to talk with a UPnP gateway. And UPnP, you know, the Universal Plug and Play Protocol, also something that comes back a lot with those different malwares in IoT, because it's one of those things that, yeah, it's left open sometimes on the wide area network and can be used to just build port forwarding. Well, here you have the commands to create a new port forwarding. So what this allows Mozi to do, when it's inside a home, it uses UPnP to talk with the device of the home because you know it's using peer-to-peer. And anybody who tried BitTorrent, BitTorrent works best if you publish the port, if you open a port in your firewall and allow connections from the outside because peers are trying to connect to you. So you need to have a presence on the internet. You need to have a port open in your firewall for your BitTorrent to be able to have peers connecting into you. And if you do that, you build like a peer-to-peer network where you can exchange and download files. Now the same happens with PlayStation, Xbox. If you want to do multiplayer gaming and it's peer-to-peer connections that those gaming servers are using, you will also expose your PlayStation onto the internet. Of course, you don't know that. Why? Because it happens automatically. The PlayStation, the Xbox, and BitTorrent, they all have code in there that are able to send a broadcast search. So you see here multicast address 239.255.255.250 and the port 1900. That's the multicast address to find SSDP on the local network. So if you send out there, that's the discovery protocol that is being used. So it's the simple service discovery protocol, yeah, that is being used on the supposed to be used only on a LAN network. But yeah, you know, people install servers by default and they forget that there's a WAN interface and they need to disable it explicitly. So SSDP also runs on the outside sometimes and it's being used for DDoS amplification. But inside the LAN, if you just send an msearch HTTP on that port and that multicast address, any device in your network that supports UPnP will respond. So when it responds, the device is also able to ask for which schemas do you support and which capabilities do you have, and those are the capabilities. So the one IP connection and one connection device, internet gateway device, those are the ones that you need to look for in a device where you can configure a port forwarding, a dynamic port forwarding. So the IGT stands for Internet Gateway Device. So it's Universal Plug and Play Internet Gateway Device. Um, I already talked about this a lot in the past, but it keeps coming back. So here are the commands. So here you see like when you do a post to that device that you discovered here, you do a post, it's SOAP, so it's a XML body, and you post to create a new remote host. and you say the external port will be this, the protocol is this, internal port, which is the port of the botnet itself, the botnet is listening to, the internal client is the IP address of the device infected by the botnet, enable it, and do a port mapping. So what it does actually is in your firewall, it creates an open port on the public IP of the firewall that is forwarded to the device that the bot has infected. And this is the command that you need to do that. There's no authentication, there's no nothing. That's the whole thing about UPnP. It's auto magical, right? But it's also very dangerous at the same time. We have seen bots use that actually as a remote attack to just configure port forwarding between different devices to bounce between different devices on the internet. When they send traffic to one device, it's configured to forward to the next device, and that one forwards to the next device. So it's like bouncing around in devices to create anonymous, like not tunnels, but anonymous forwarding or anonymous hops. So that was Mozi.
On to the fun stuff.
Yeah.
For the last 10 minutes, we'll do a little fun recap here on gaming. As everybody's very well aware, as we enter the final season of 2020,
Yeah.
there's many games released.
Long
Specifically,
dark
we have PlayStation
evenings.
5.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, a little doom and gloom everywhere, right?
Yeah.
And with PlayStation 5 being released in November, I think November 12th, we can expect more holiday related DDoS attacks directed at gaming. Seems to be a pretty tried and true pattern for the last few years here. That as games are released, there are an influx of natural traffic and malicious traffic directed at these servers, which cause a lot of problems to players. And as we saw on October 2nd and October 3rd, these attacks can have some serious impacts as far as disrupting gameplay, latency, and upsetting players to the point where they actually want to commit a crime, which to me is strange, right? I guess I'm not of the gaming generation or anything, but to go commit a crime like that.
You're a millennial, no?
It's debatable. It's debatable. It's 81 or 85.
I'm a Gen Xer, so
I'm just maybe I'll just flop down to Gen Z and just say we're gonna go with it. But yeah, in general, to see these kids commit a crime because of an issue on a game is very interesting. And as we saw early in the year, some of these gaming publishers are actually taking these gamers to court and trying to press charges on them. It's very difficult to enforce. It's very difficult to go after some of these cheaters and some of these people that are launching these attacks. And gaming companies are kind of left in a position to protect their own network. I mean, for a long time, they kind of relied on outside legal law enforcement to come in and stop these. But as we saw with the many alerts and blogs that we've put out about DDoS stressors, right? They're not going anywhere. There's been many takedowns, and they just come right back. And as we've talked about throughout this, even just this seminar here, the tactics, techniques, and procedures are changing completely when it comes down to DDoS. So they're regaming, they're retooling these old devices such as Mirai, that came out in 2016, and they're still very valuable in 2020, targeting these gaming operators.
yeah. So it was actually Blizzard that you're referring to that in beginning of this year, in January of this year, when we were still thinking that, oh, it's gonna be a nice year for DDoS, Blizzard is going out and then suing a unknown booter stressor service for attacking their systems. We didn't know yet what was gonna happen in 2020 at that moment. We were still happy and
Yeah,
but yeah, they're very particular. It's a vertical where there's lots of emotions, and it's even happened now more recent with how it's called, that cyberpunk game, Cyberpunk 77, or how is it called?
honestly, I don't play games, but I know there's a
Well,
cyberpunk game that's been
yeah,
the problem with it is it's been postponed, right? It's supposed to come
yeah,
out by now,
it's
but
it's
it had.
postponed,
It's
yeah,
the only
and
reason.
well,
The
actually
only
the
reason I know about the game is because of their delays, and that
yeah,
says
well,
something. I mean, I'm
yeah,
not a gamer,
hmm
but a gamer that knows that and it's being delayed, they might
yeah,
actually launch an attack. And
yeah,
quick
that's
little thing. It was Ubisoft that was suing
oh, it
players.
was
I don't think it
Ubisoft.
was
Ah,
Blizzard.
okay,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
right, yeah, they
The
also
Rainbow
were,
Six
yeah.
issue. Yeah.
So yeah, Blizzard was one of those who was attacked for postponement, but now with that um, yeah, that cyberpunk game, they had actually people, so the devs through Twitter got messages where they got life-threatening situations. So some people said, "I'm gonna kill you if you don't launch it next week, if you postpone for next 2 months," because yeah, kids and young adults, or maybe even old adults who like cyberpunk, they were waiting to play that game. And like now, next week it's vacation in Belgium. We have our yeah, how it's called, fall vacation. So
Yeah.
and there will be holidays coming up. So people already planned their holidays of playing that, and their whole mind was sit on, I'm gonna play that game from the first day of my holiday until the last day of my holiday, and I will have so much fun. And now they get to hear, sorry guys, but yeah, we still have problems with performance on the legacy platforms and on the newer platforms, so it will be postponed to the end of the year. They get so mad and angry, they send bad Twitter messages, but some just go to DDoS and perform attacks. And we have,
And to an extent, like you can't really. It's a hard one to blame them too, because I mean we're in the middle of COVID. We can't go out. I mean, I would love to go up to the mountains. I'd love to go out to sporting events. I can't do it. I have to sit at home all day. Luckily, I like to mess around the internet and build out honeypots and watch what's going on. But other people have literally planned for this whole entire fall and winter to play video games because they know they can't go out. They know they can't travel. So
yeah,
someone that might normally go on vacations has reallocated those vacation funds to buy a brand new PlayStation 5. And when that comes out, if the
yeah,
games aren't out, there's delays and all kinds of issues. They just wasted their money and wasted their time and have nothing to do during
yeah,
quarantine, which is
exactly.
a problem.
Yeah, it makes it all that more difficult. People are already frustrated with the whole quarantine. Then you get lockdown on top of that. It's getting long evenings. Yeah, so that adds to the frustration, to the emotion. And we have a question on our chat. So Michael, thanks again for the question. So are these attacks typically burst attacks? I would say, yeah, there's different kinds of attacks. We have a good document explaining that because 2 or 3 months ago, so in September, yeah, no, early September, we did a launch of new modules in Defense Pro that do mitigation and detection of attacks specifically for gaming. And there's different levels. So in the lobby, it will be more of TCP connectivity to a central server. And then when you have the chat and the whole in-game session, they will use UDP. So if you're saying, is it typically burst attack? It can be burst attack because they can do, for example, burst attack will be typically something that is UDP based, and they can send burst attacks and like creating high latency without continuously DDoSing. They can create high latency and then it falls back to normal. And frankly, if I would like to piss off some kids that are playing a game, I would go for a burst attack. Yeah, I would send a
Yeah.
burst attack. Somebody was trying to shoot and suddenly everything freezes and they get annoyed because they could not shoot, and then everything goes fine again for 2 minutes, and then boom, another small burst on top of it. Up and again it freezes, so they get so frustrated, man. This is gonna be double hard for them if they get it in small portions. Then you just kick out the server for good and kick off everybody. No, so I think that a burst attack would be a good choice here to frustrate people even more because that's what those people are after. It's frustrating the other people so that the reputation of the gaming company gets hurt by it. So yeah, good question.
Yeah, it's definitely a good question. And another little thing to add on there is the amount of money and sponsorships that go into gaming nowadays. So you can imagine someone like Ninja or any of the other famous players that have latency in the middle of their streams. That can cost
Yeah.
them a lot of money as far as people not watching their streams and advertisement and everything. So burst wave attack would definitely be an interesting way to go about it.
Yeah, so yeah, we got the comment from Michael. That's what my sons have shared with me from a user perspective.
It's always the kids that know everything,
Yeah.
man. I swear.
Yeah, we have come to rely on our kids to understand what hackers are doing, right?
It's survival of the fittest, I guess, nowadays as a
Yeah,
kid. I mean, back in my day, I played on Nintendo, like NES. Like my mitigation was blowing on a cartridge to get the dust out of it.
yeah,
Nowadays, I guess Michael's sons have to actually look into burst wave attacks and understand a DDoS attack.
yeah,
It's tough life there. Hey, maybe they'll
yeah.
become researchers. Eh?
Well, yeah, my son is 7 and he likes Roblox and he's always talking about hackers on the Roblox and he sees that on YouTube because on YouTube they show all kinds of hacks in Roblox and then he starts to do those hacks himself. So they
Oh
already start,
no,
yeah, this
that's
is really bad, If this is the age that you start, I had my first computer at my 12 years, so you can imagine what this new generation will be like. It will be all fun and games out there. And talking about fun and games, sniping,
Oh yeah.
trolling, scalping, that is actually what
So
happened this month to Nvidia.
I don't know much about gaming. Like I said, like my case with GPUs and all that was back in the day with mining. But when it comes down to shoes and other hype beast type of items, this is very parallel. This is as far as
Yeah,
scraping, sniping, and trolling,
I have a slide on that,
kind
so we will come back to that in a second. Let me just first set the
oh,
stage of what Nvidia. Yeah, but I have a special deck on that. Otherwise, we will be silent for that last slide. And I know that we're
I'm
running
getting
past.
excited here.
Yeah, and I know that we're already at the top of the hour, but we will continue a little bit more. And people who have to disconnect, don't worry, everything it's on YouTube, so you can watch whenever you want. You relax, you just watch. And I prefer to go through. If you still have the time, Daniel, is it okay for you?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm good to
Okay.
go, man. Yep.
So Nvidia, they have those new hot gaming cards, GPUs that are called RTX 3080. I say gaming cards, but actually, as you already made the remark, they are used for mining, but they're also used more and more for AI. So everybody who's into AI, so deep learning, everybody who's into mining, everybody who's into gaming, even
I was gonna say it's
encoding.
really unfortunate for the gamers. There's a lot
Yeah,
more people using GPUs for other
yeah.
things.
Yeah, and people who are ready to pay much more money because AI research has more money than a teenager's pocket money, right? And then the guy who does
Yeah.
crypto mining, well, he knows exactly where he gets his money from. It's from that card. So Nvidia not only are they are struggling with scarcity and components that are using, especially the memory because they use X memory, which is extra fast. But besides that, so when they launched this one and they went on sale, like more than 50, and somebody did on it was on Reddit, somebody who did a poll asking, and it were like 1,200 people who responded to that poll. 50% said that the button went from disabled straight to sold out on the website. So they never even saw buy now. Now, 50% saw buy now, but then they went in, they took the card, put it in their cart, in their checkout cart, and then it disappeared. While they tried to check out, it just disappeared and it was gone. And then they tried to find a new one, it was already gone. And what happened is that scalpers, so scalping bots are those automated bots that connect, and what they do is whenever that website is enabled, they immediately go in, they already have the credit card details, so they open the page, put the product in the checkout cart, they check out immediately, and they do that in a second, in a blink of an eye. And
Yeah.
some were able to grab like 30 or even 40 cards. And the idea is they buy as many cards as possible to resell them on other marketplaces. So on secondary
And some of
gray
these people are really
marketplaces.
smart. They're using different credit cards, different addresses.
Oh
They
yeah, yeah, yeah,
they they,
yeah.
they
But
know
here
the
it
little the
was,
little things that are
yeah.
there.
Yeah, but now you're already one step too far, and you can talk about that during the sneaker bot page. But in here, with Nvidia, they didn't even have a captcha. So come on, Nvidia, they didn't even put a captcha in front of it. So that is like zero protection against bot.
Yeah.
If you ask me, they would have been much more efficient if they just published the API and never built a web page for humans to connect to, because bots can go straight to the API and buy it. Come on. Sorry, I am
That would be
being
fun.
sarcastic. I should not be, but oh, and by the way, I was not
No, no, I
trying.
get it.
I am not one of the trolls or the snipers who are trying to buy a car. So what happens? Those people go to eBay and now they put them on. So they put it for sale on eBay, typically doubling the price. Some of them put a fixed price, and all you could do is just buy it. Now, some of them wanted to use the dynamic of the market. So they put it in an auction and say, okay, let everybody put a bid on it, and let's drive the price up by putting bids on it. And some of the people that did not get access to cart and tried to buy it in a good thing. And if you go look on YouTube and you type Nvidia RTX and scalping, you will see lots of YouTubers who are angry at the scalpers, and but also at Nvidia, of course, for not protecting, but especially the scalpers that go on eBay and do that auction to sell the cards at the highest bidder. So somebody came back and built a sniping bot. So and actually, sniping bot is an auction sniping. Those are standard bots that are out there. And did I say the name of the marketplace? I wasn't supposed to.
No, no.
Okay. So they typically go to the marketplaces and they have those bots, and what those bots do is they go in and they place a bid on an item. So you say I want this specific item. That is the starting price. I put in my maximum bid I want to give, but I want to pay, of course, as less as possible. So what this bot is doing, each time that somebody bids on that item, the bot will look at the price. If it's still lower than your maximum price, it will just add like 50 cents and put in a new bid. And whenever somebody else comes in, the bot always like outbids them with half or with 10 cents or 50 cents. And that's how you can win an auction. Now, somebody took a bot like that and ran it online on those people who are trying to sell the RTXs. And you can see now on those marketplaces, you can see prices going up to $100,000. And that's not because people want to buy it for that price or did a bid for that price. It's just that bot that was set there and he put in several bids and that brought up the price. So he wanted just to outprice it so that nobody would buy it. And you can also see somebody else who wrote another bot who just did listings, who did posts in the e-marketplace. And that post said, Nvidia GeForce RTX handwritten paper. So it's not a card. It says it's a handwritten paper on a dog. The Borg edition.
I thought this one
And,
was
and it
funny.
says,
I mean,
yeah,
this
it's
is
TX
good humor.
380. And you can buy it for $599. So and that is just to they put it as much as possible to flush out all the other ones. So that's the trolling part, the one that drives up. So with the auction bots, that's sniping, and then the scalping part was what brought all of this together. So the Nvidia story in September was about scalping, sniping, and trolling. So it's like a good chapter and a good example what bots are able to do out there. So Daniel, I
Yeah,
let
and
you talk
it's.
about your sneakers now.
I mean, I don't have really too much to say other than it's the same thing as we're seeing as far as the scalping, sniping, and trolling for Nvidia. It's the same thing you see with shoes, as far as Yeezys and Jordans to Bape hoodies and everything else in between. People run these bots to go out and purchase them. As I said, they'll use different credit cards, they'll use different addresses, they'll use different ways of defeating CAPTCHA in order to make these purchases before a human has a chance to even cart the items. And then they get put on third-party markets where people come in and they'll intentionally bid on it to ramp the price. Sometimes they don't use a bot, sometimes they use these sniping bots, and it's a giant problem. And I think that we're going to start seeing more of these issues in the digital realm. As far as like, yeah, we talked about this for quite a while about shoes and hypebeast clothing and tickets to events. But I think the real problem, the straw that breaks the camel's back to say, is going to be somewhere with the GPUs and this technology, as far as people not being able to buy them. I mean, I know people that have dozens of pre-orders of PlayStations. They come to me all the time. Oh, you
Hmm.
want to buy a PlayStation? No, I don't. I don't want to pay the retail of that. I don't. I will wait until they release the next batch around Christmas or after Christmas. But then again, I'm not a gamer, so I don't have that drive and passion to go buy it. Now, if it was shoes or hoodies, I might actually have the passion to go buy it. So I can see where consumers would be frustrated. Like I said, in quarantine, coming into the winter seasons where everybody stays at home, and they've planned this huge winter of playing video games and having fun with their friends online, and social distancing the right way, and they can't because everything's sold out, and people want to run up the prices for GPUs, and they want to run up the prices for games and everything. It's problematic. It's really sad at the end of the day that we're out here trying to do good, but there's a lot of people out there doing bad, and it's very frustrating this year, I'd say, because there's more of an impact, specifically to the
Yeah, for
COVID
sure.
side. We're all trying to stay at home and do the right thing, um, but criminals are going to profit these moments. These are moments of opportunity for them as
Oh yeah,
well.
yeah.
So
We see it in the scams and the phishing, but also in this area, it's also
yeah, it's a tough one for the consumer and all the victims at the moment. We just got to work hard. That's all we have to do is continue coming to the plate every day. I mean, the criminals will come to the plate every day as long as
yeah,
we do. We can fight
exactly.
a good fight.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a
Yeah.
good note to end, I think. So Daniel, it was a pleasure.
Yeah, we didn't go too long. Yeah, definitely a good one.
So everybody, I hope you liked it. If you liked it, subscribe and come back and for new episodes. If you didn't see the previous episodes, we have 4 more like this that are online out there. So I put them all in a playlist on the Radware channel on YouTube, so you can go there. You can watch the older versions. We talk about all kinds of IT stuff. So whatever comes to our mind, we try to talk about it, and whatever can be profitable for you, we try to bring it in. So with that, thank you very much for joining us, Daniel. Thank you very much, and I would say high five.
Wait. We can do this.
Yeah, we can do it.
Oh, hold
Yeah.
on.
Okay. Yeah.
There we go. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
It's
Thank
a
you.
social distance high five.
Exactly. Thank you very much,
All right. See you later, man.
everybody. See you. Bye
Take
bye.
care.
All right.